Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. It is still winter outside the greenhouse, but here in the greenhouse, it's definitely spring. The sights of spring are everywhere in the greenhouse here. I've got flowers, I've got leaves starting to come out. The buds are all swelling on the trees. So, today I've got out my larch forest. I tried to delay spring as long as I could in the greenhouse, but it's coming no matter what. I can see on the larch trees that the buds are starting to open on some of the trees back there. On most of the trees, the buds are just swelling. But they're swelling to the point where I can see what buds are alive and what's dead. So today, I'm going to prune up the larch forest. I've always pruned this forest so the trees are all individual trees, pruning the trees to a tight conical form, not allowing branches from one tree to overlap into the other tree. And it's a very challenging practice to do this because I can't let the trees grow. I have to keep them to a certain size. Otherwise I get that overlapping and congestion of branches, and you don't get light to the interior of the forest, so you get a lot of branch dieback. So it's been a learning process, this forest. When I first started out, I wasn't as meticulous with the pruning, and I did lose a lot of branches on the interior of the forest due to lack of light, just letting the tops grow too much. It blocked out the light to the lower branches and some of them died off. So I've been managing it much more carefully these last few years, or last decade, and I think the forest is improving, and I think my skills of clip and grow are improving also, which is helping. And I think this forest will always be a challenge to keep the trees to a certain size instead of letting them grow into giant trees. It's a challenge, and I find that with a lot of bonsai that growing the tree a little larger each year, kind of pinching it back, it's challenging, but it's not as challenging as keeping the tree to a certain size. And one of the forests that really inspired me is my bog forest, getting those tight conical forms to the larches and the spruce. And it's kind of inspired me to maybe tighten up the conical shape on these trees also. I think I love the look of a powerful trunk with a slim conical canopy. I think it's a really nice look. It makes the tree look really large if it's done correctly. So I'll be pruning these trees up today. It should be exciting, giving them their spring prune. Now I am hoping to show this tree in spring at the Toronto Bonsai Society's spring show. So I'm keeping that in mind when I prune it. I'm not going to do pruning operations that take a couple of years to recover. Like when I pruned the top off the main tree there, I knew it would take a long time before the tree is showable again. And it's maybe still in that process of getting this apex looking good, but I think it looks natural enough that the trees could be shown. I think, as anything in bonsai, it keeps improving, hopefully, over the years. So, yeah, there's always something on the tree that will look better the next year. Let's fly in now and have a look at the forest. So here you can see all the buds and see how they're all visible. Let me zoom in. See how you can see all the little buds? Some of the tips are turning green on some of them. Some are coming out. Yeah, so it's getting quite dense, this forest. Let me get above here. You can see all the branches. So my goal is to keep the apex of these trees from getting too thick, keeping the branches from thickening up too much, keeping my conical form, and trying to keep my ramification. It's a difficult challenge to do everything. So here I go. I'm starting this work early in the morning because I think it's going to take me a long time to prune up all these trees. There is a lot of branches to look at and examine, and a lot of decisions to be made. And this could even take a few days to finish. I'm in no rush, so I'm just going to take my time, work on the trees carefully, and prune them up. And, if it takes me 2-3 days, that's fine with me. I just want to do it carefully and accurately. Time is not a factor, or it shouldn't be a factor when you're creating bonsai. Okay, so here's the apex of the tree. Now you can see it's just exploded. It's very vigorous. It's exploded in branches. My goal, this was a branch, and my goal was to, all branches on trees, if they're at the apex, they will slowly straighten up over the years. And I've seen this many times on larches. A 90-degree branch, if it's made to be the leader, it will crank up slowly over the years and become vertical. So that's my goal with this apex, is that, over the years it'll straighten up and it'll become the new leader of the tree. And I've done this operation many times on some of the other trees in this forest, and it's always successful. So right now this leader has a lot of vigor in it, and it needs the vigor to straighten this branch up. And people say, well, why don't you just use wire? And the reason I don't use wire, to crank this branch up, I would have to really use some thick wire and really pull it vertical, and I would end up with all these spiral wire marks in the apex of this tree. I don't want that. I want these trees to look natural. I don't want wire marks on them. So I'm doing it with clip and grow, as usual. So I'm looking on this branch here. I've got a vertical branch that grows up. I'm going to take that out for starters. It's just no good there. Like that. Putting that off. Now I've explained in my trees. Let me just explain this again. Trees in nature, and this is a generalization, the lower branches droop. As you go up the tree, they become more and more horizontal. And as you get near the apex, they go more vertical to the apex, which is vertical. And you'll see this a lot in nature. It's not always the case with every tree, but it's very typical. So I want my branches at the bottom to be drooping, which is hard to do with clip and grow, but it's something I'm working on. And then as I go up the tree, they become more and more horizontal. And ideally, I want my horizontal branches to be about a third the height of the canopy. So here's my lowest branch here. Here's my highest. So about a third is here, is where I want my branches horizontal. So all the ones below, I want them to droop more and more as it goes down, lower down the tree. And as I go above this point, I want them to start going more and more vertical, and the apex will be vertical. So that's the general branch arrangement I want. I don't want, you'll see a lot of trees where every branch is cascading on the same angle, and it looks very artificial. You don't want that generally on trees. You want a lot of angle at the bottom, less and less, and then slightly going vertical so you get towards the apex. And again, I'm speaking in a very general terms. There's always exceptions to the rules in both species and style of trees. But I just dislike that general styling where everyone sets the branches at the exact same angle. And they do this not considering the species or the style of the tree. It's just something they generally do. They do it on maples, they do it on beech trees, they do it on everything. And it drives me crazy sometimes that people... One thing I've always pushed on this channel is for people to study trees. And you don't have to go out in nature to study them. You can go on the internet and look at tree pictures, look at videos on trees. You'll see every style in the world about a specific species of tree. You'll see, a beech tree growing tall. You'll see a beech tree short and bushy. But they all have basic characteristics of that species in the styling of the tree, and that's what you want to capture in your bonsai, is specific nuances or characteristics of the species in your bonsai. You don't want to make your maples look like pine trees and that kind of a styling, that general kind of bonsai styling, which I see a lot, that, you know, the trees look like bonsai, not trees from nature. And I get it. I mean, there's people, if that's their style, you know, that's their style. If they're doing it on purpose, you know, they don't want their trees to look like trees in nature, well, I guess that's all right. I don't think that thinking should be the norm. I think that should be the exception. I do want to eliminate crossing branches that are getting too thick, so this one's coming off like that. But again, you know, it's personal and an artistic decision on how you style your trees. But I think we have to remember that bonsai these are trees, and we're trying to miniaturize trees. We're not creating driftwood sculptures or abstract art. Generally, some people do, but I think, you know, when it comes down to it, they should look like trees. They shouldn't look like bizarre sculptures. I think, anyway. I'm sure there's someone who will disagree with me. I've heard every argument in the world against creating your bonsai to look like miniaturized versions of full-size trees. People say, well, that's not an art, it's just horticulture. And it's like, no, it's art. You say, well, that's the idea of bonsai, is to put your own expression into it. And yeah, it is, but at the sacrifice of it looking like a tree, is that really what you want? That vertical one has to come off here. I don't know. It never hurts to think about your goals in bonsai, what they are, what your design philosophy is. If you don't have a design philosophy, well, then you are practicing horticulture and not art. I think you have to have a vision or a design philosophy for your trees in order for this hobby to become an art. I mean, I've thought a lot. My apex line comes up here. So this is my apex. And these are branches, and this one is really, really thick. And eventually I know I'll have to prune it off. I'm just wondering, do I do it now? Or do I do it? I do have this branch back here. And these two are very crowded together. I'm just wondering if that apex is going to look too empty if I get rid of that. I'll just have, you know, one branch here in my apex. And this one kind of reaches upward, which is nice, whereas this one's maybe too horizontal. Well, let me get rid of the horizontal aspect to this. So it is reaching upwards, and that one's okay. Yeah, when you have, you know, thousands of pruning decisions on trees, it does become, you know, an art, because you're making all the decisions. You're deciding what it's going to look like. It's your vision of the tree. Now I do, on this branch, I seem to have a dead stub back here. I think I'll leave it till later. I can always prune it back once it starts to leaf out to make sure it is dead. Yeah, I'm not sure about this, if I need to prune it away today. I could certainly prune the back part of it off, and I will. I have a part of this branch comes forward and then part comes back, so I'm going to take the back part off like that. That simplifies it a lot. Kind of gets rid of this thick part a bit, and it's very thin here. And then I've got on this branch, I've got part coming forward, part of it coming forward underneath this part, and I've got a better part at the back. So I'm going to take off this forward part. That way each branch will have its room. So I've got the one to the back, the one to the front, and my apex. Now, my apex is still too many branches in the apex. It's going to cause that to thicken up too much, so I've got to simplify it. So that's kind of got the apex pruned up. I've got a lot of branches to go, so I think you know my goals. You know, a tight conical shape, the branch direction cascading and going up towards the apex, and simplifying, less vigor in the top of the tree, allowing more vigor in the bottom to kind of balance the vigor. So, you know, a little harder pruning at the top of the tree and less at the bottom. And so I'll just go at it. Also removing any branches that are overlapping and branches that are thickening up too much, I will try and slim them down by taking off some of the vigorous growth on them. So it'll be quite an operation getting these trees pruned up. But like I said, I've got all day today, all day tomorrow. And if I have to go into day 3, I'll go into day 3. I could get this done today. We'll see how it goes. Decisions on these trees are never easy. They're never easy. It's always, you always have to think, and yeah, there's always a lot of factors: position, branch position, ramification, vigor, that makes interesting decisions. Like here's a branch here. Let me show you this one. This outer part flows better than this part. However, this part is getting far away from the trunk. This branch is closer to the trunk line. So what I have to do is prune away the part that's going too far away from the trunk and then develop this into a flowing branch. So it may have a bit of a kink to it like this one does. You can see it kind of comes, almost turns back on itself and then flows outwards. So these are the kind of branches that I'll end up with, is these very twisty branches, but it'll get my tree compact to the trunk slowly. So that's what I have to do here, is I have to make the hard decision of, you know, pruning off a more flowing branch to keep one that's closer to the trunk line, to keep the tree compact. Otherwise, you know, as I said, these trees just keep growing larger every year. They'll start shading out the branches below. So here I go. Here's that difficult decision, cutting off this branch, keeping the one closer to the trunk line, and yeah, developing that. So I'm just checking this branch structure, always looking good. It divides from 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2. So I'll just leave that the way it is. I could prune off the part coming in towards the middle, kind of getting my direction flowing to the outwards part of the tree a little more. I think that's probably going to look better than having ramification here. So I think I'll take this off also. Cut this back just slightly. So there's my branch now. You can see, yeah, it's as compact as I can get it. There's no buds, back budding on the branch here. Maybe in the future, someday, I will get some back buds on this branch and I can shorten this branch even more because it is getting very long. But for now, that's the best I can do on this branch. Okay, so I'm working my way down this tree, making difficult decisions. Again here, I'm getting too far, spread out too far on this branch. I need to prune it back. And I think some of these twists and turns on the branches is what gives a tree nice character, is that, you know, you can use them they become features in the future. If every branch was smooth and flowing, well, maybe the tree would be not so interesting. But when you get cool clip and grow branches, they can look awesome as they mature. And you can see all these branches are clip and grow, and they have some nice movement to them, nice character to them. Just these apexes are a little unsorted at the moment, and I think that's because I just didn't do the best pruning on these apex in the past. Some of the trees are quite nice. This one, it was taller, and I decided to cut it down and try and correct the inverse taper it had, and so I'm trying to manage it better in the future. It's hard. I'll hope I'm successful, but you know, we'll see what happens. So this branch divides into two here. I've got a thick end that comes off here and a thinner part that comes to the front. It is possible to prune off that whole thick end, which would definitely make the tree more compact from the front view. But again, I'm losing a ton of ramification, and it doesn't flow as nicely as this branch, but in the end, I think that's the correct decision, because this part of this branch is blocking the one behind. So I'm taking it off. This is a major cut. Let me show you that. Here's that branch here. So it comes out and it divides into two. This part is thicker and it's further away from the trunk line in the front view anyway than this one. So I think I've got to take that off, which makes a very twisty branch, but as I said, from the front view it makes it more compact. So yeah, it's kind of, and this branch is thickening up too much. You can see it has too much vigor to be this high up in the tree. So that's one of the reasons I want to zap some vigor out of it by taking this part off and developing this. So here I go. It's a fairly major cut. So I'm coming in here and clipping that part off, just like that. So there's that, the part I took off. And it's kind of strange looking now, but from the front view, it'll look better. And eventually it will flow nicely. I'm taking this vertical part off here. This vertical part comes off here. Trim the tip off there, and the tip off here. Dead part here. Turn this a little closer. And this, I think this one's dead. Yeah, it is. Take that right off like that. Okay, so there, that branch is pruned up. I'll show you from the front view now. So here's that branch here, and you can see, you know, it's a little unusual, but it did bring it in from this length down compact, and it kind of grows around. It's, yeah, it's a little bit strange, but eventually this will grow out, and I can kind of continue this branch so it looks a little more flowing. But yeah, it's more compact, and now you can see the branch behind a little more clearly also. I'm going to prune that branch behind it now. And again, I have a fairly thick tip on this branch that I can prune off shorter. Right to here. Taking that thick tip off the branch, replacing it with thinner ones. I'll prune this back, this one back. I'm going to take off, they're all beautiful branches. Let me show you this branch from the top view. Here's a look at that branch, so you can see it's got great flow, great ramification. It's a beautiful branch, but if I leave it like that, again, it's going to get too thick. It'll thicken up and look really bad in the future, and I'll get inverse taper on my apex of these trees, like the trunk line, and it'll just cause all kinds of problems. So again, I've got to sacrifice ramification and vigor, cutting these branches back, kind of keeping them a little slimmer. Some decisions on this branch are fairly obvious. Like, I have a vertical part here. I want to take that right off. It doesn't look good. And I couldn't shorten the branch to this vertical part because it would just look too awkward looking. So I'm going to take that off. I'm not sure why I didn't take it off last time, but it's off now. I'll just nibble that a bit. Now I'm getting quite long on this branch, so I need to shorten it. And I'm just looking to where I could go back fairly hard to here. Taking the whole end off this branch, which it flows beautifully, but again, it's getting too far away from the trunk line. There's two branches in closer here. I could keep those, taking the entire end off this branch, a big cut, losing all that beautiful ramification. But I think that's the correct decision for this tree. Hate doing it, but that's what I've got to do. So this is a big cut. Here I go. Wow. Here goes. Taking the end off this branch. Oh my goodness, look at that beautiful branch. I'm left with, that's what I'm left with. But, thinking of the future. I'm also thinking about this show that's coming up. But generally, I find these trees fill out very quickly. Once the foliage comes in, you don't even notice that I pruned off 80% of the ramification on the branch. I'm just shortening some of these branches back, making them more compact. I'm going to keep this vertical part on this branch for now. Am I? No, I'm not. Taking it off. There's enough buds down here. There's a branch going back in towards the center of the tree. I'll take that off. So that's got that branch pruned up. Very simple now. It comes out from the trunk, divides from 1 to 2. Not a very good flowing looking branch, and there's not a lot of ramification on it, but it shortened it a lot. Like, really shortened it. And I think that was the correct move for the future. I've got the same thing happening on this branch here. I'll have to prune the whole tip off back to somewhere back here, or even back to here, to kind of get my conical shape. So let's do that one next. Another hard prune. Okay, so here is the branch. So I have a budding back here, here. So I can at least take this whole end off back to here for sure. Or I could take it even further back to here. I think I would like to take it right back to here. I've got branches each side. It'd certainly make the tree more compact, so I'm going to have to. So here I go. Oh, another ouch moment. But you're setting the tree up for the future. Well, you're setting it up so you can maintain the shape for the future. That the tree doesn't become this sprawling octopus that can't be controlled. Oh, is that a spider? That's a spider. Yeah, so it becomes a tree you can manage with pruning. Okay, so there is a backup branch on this one, very close to the trunk back here, but I think this is still good. It stays in my conical shape. Oh, okay. Let me look from the front. Here's what the forest is looking like from the front. So I think I'm making progress. I'm definitely getting that conical shape more in check, even though I'm losing a lot of nice branching. I'm shedding tears here, but yeah, like I said, you just can't keep these growing out more and more, thickening up, and it's part of bonsai doing this. Part of clip and grow bonsai, or any bonsai. You just have to prune it back. Okay, so the next branch is this one. Again, it's getting a little long. It's not as bad as the other branches. It's maybe a little more compact. So on this one, I can just take the very tip off the branch. Like that. Not too much at all. Clean it up a bit. Like that. Looks good. This part can also be brought back a little more compact. I have a cool branch that comes up here. It's very larch-like, having kind of these sprawling branches at the end. Be nice if I could keep both, but I can't. I've got to reduce it back, so I'll keep my upper one, which is very interesting. Okay, so it's definitely got it more compact, more in the conical style. It's actually, do I have a straight edge out here? You can see how I'm developing that conical form. This branch is good. They're all kind of in line. So that's about as tight as I can get that conical form for now. I won't have to do much pruning on these lower branches. On this side of the tree, I'm getting close to a conical form. It's improved after today. If I can get maybe some backbiting here or even here, I could really improve this tree. But, you know, every tree doesn't have to look perfect. These trees are getting old, and you'll find in nature that when trees get old, the branches start getting contorted, and, you know, parts of them break off in storms, and you get a lot of interesting branches as a tree gets really, really old. There's a vertical shoot I'm taking off here. So I'll keep going down the tree, keeping my conical form in mind. I think I have finished pruning up the main tree. Wow. Let's have a look at it. The bear is still staying in its cave down there. So here's the main tree. So I hope, you know, here's what I took off of it. Like some really, really nice stuff. But I think if you look at the tree overall, I think the overall shape and silhouette of the tree is improved. How many trees do I have? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more trees to go. So this forest is an even planting. So I've got 2 groups of trees. I have the group of 3 on the left-hand side here and the group of 5 on the right-hand side. So overall, I have an even number of trees. But if you divide it into sections, they have an odd number of trees in each of the sections of the forest, kind of a division down the middle here. So I think overall it looks very pleasing. I think if I had, you know, 1 more tree over here to make it the total number an odd number, one of the sides would then have an even number of trees, and I don't think it would look as good. So I think, you know, sometimes you have to bend the rules a bit, going with an even number, even though to make the forest look better overall. And I don't know, that's my feeling anyway. I'm going to continue pruning up the rest of the trees in the forest. I think that first tree gave you a good taste of all the difficult decisions that I have to make on the rest of the trees. I'm sure they'll be exactly the same. There'll be tough choices, sacrificing beautiful branch structure for the overall shape of the tree, keeping my trees compact. But yeah, it's all part of growing a bonsai forest, keeping those trees tight and compact. And it's a very difficult thing to do over, you know, many, many years, like 25 years here. So I'll continue pruning up the forest, And if anything spectacular comes up, big tough decisions, I'll show you that. If not, I'll just continue working away, probably for the rest of today. Okay, that's got to come back to there. Some decisions are easy, but some are very difficult. Here comes another tough decision. So if I look at this branch here, you can see it divides from 1 into 2 fairly early, close to the trunk line. And it's getting very vigorous, and it's quite high up in the apex of the tree. And if I let both of these branches grow, they're both nice, it's going to thicken up too much, especially this high up on the tree. You can see it's already thicker than some of the lower branches down here. So I need to prune off one of these divisions to zap the vigor out of this branch. This one's a skinnier one, but from the front view, it's crossing the trunk line. So I've got to decide, well, what do I keep? The thicker one out here or the one that's crossing the trunk line? And, you know, it seems obvious that, well, you want to get rid of the one that crosses the trunk line. But, again, you'll see trees in nature doing that. And this one is the thicker over here. And I also have a branch to the right here. This one's to the right, and the one above is to the right, and not much out this side. I've got one way back here. That's kind of on that side, but nothing else. So if I got rid of the one on this side, I've got this huge empty spot on the tree. And I kind of like occasionally branches that cross the trunk line. I see them in nature all the time. And that's the way I'm leaning, is to get rid of this whole section here and keep the one that crosses the trunk line. I can't keep them both. It's just going to thicken up way too much. So that's my dilemma. There is a third possibility, and that's to kill off this side of the branch and make it deadwood. So this is the living part. This is the deadwood part over here. Because I do have other branches in this forest that are dead. Especially on that main tree. I've got a couple to the right hand side which aren't living branches. So if I kill this branch off, it's not contributing to the thickness of this branch, and yet I kind of get the best of both worlds. So I think I'm going to try that option. Killing off the living part of this branch, keeping this as my true living branch crossing the trunk. Let's see how it looks. So here I go. So what I'm going to do is cut off all the branches that have buds on this side of the tree. So here and here. So that should kill off this whole section here. And I'll just make those cuts look a little more natural. Sorry, my hand's in the way there. Just kind of make them a little more like a broken branch at the tip. This one's not the most natural looking. Like that. So this should be a dead branch now, unless by some miracle it backbuds, but I don't think it will. There's no sap flow going out to it. But we'll see. So that takes care of that branch now. Kind of maybe the best of both worlds, I hope. You can see this branch back here is rather bizarre. It comes out and grows up, sort of like a cathedral branch. And that is the result of pruning. And it kind of makes a unique branch on this tree, and I like it. It's quite nice. I'll just prune off this part. I'll prune off the part growing in towards the tree there. There's a dead stump here. Yeah, so, you know, bizarre branches like this could make the tree look very natural, and they're very interesting. Like, if you look at a tree and every branch is a perfect fan shape that you see on a lot of bonsai, well, you look at one branch and every other branch is exactly the same. So it makes the whole tree kind of boring. Whereas if you look at this tree, oh, this branch crosses the trunk line. This one goes straight up. This one maybe twists back in on itself. If you have branches like that, if they're done kind of well, it can really, really make the forest interesting, that people will sit in front of it and look at all these branches and go, wow, is that ever bizarre? Or does that ever make the tree look natural? Or that looks just like a tree I walk by every day on my morning walk, or something like that, you know. It can really create interest. So every branch isn't like a computer perfect branch, that it is natural and wild looking and unpredictable and random. That's what you want in bonsai, I think. You don't want this precision branch that looks like it was designed on a computer. I think that's why a lot of trees start to look really artificial, is that they're very contrived and styled. So every branch is perfect, textbook perfect, and the overall effect is a very unrealistic and sometimes boring looking tree. And you see this everywhere, that, you know, the tree, and I see it at shows. My favorite thing to do at shows is to see what trees people are drawn to. And I find sometimes they're not drawn to the most magnificent tree. They're drawn to characteristics on the tree that are interesting. And yeah, if you have this textbook perfect pine, people look at it and they go, okay, it's a textbook perfect pine. They don't go look at it. They might go, oh, it's got nice bark on the trunk, or it's nice branch placement, but it's kind of it's a tree you've seen hundreds of times at shows. There's nothing unique or special about it, and I think maybe that tree in the future, as it develops, will get some special characteristics to it. Maybe a branch will die off, and then the owner will have to come up with a solution to design around that dead branch. But sometimes those textbook perfect trees are the most boring trees, and people just walk by them. They're looking for something that's interesting, something that shows character, something unique and artistic. And those textbook perfect trees often don't fit that bill, so people just walk by them. So if you go to a bonsai show, look at the trees that people look at, and then think, well, why are they attracted to that tree and not my tree, or not this tree? And you know, when you're doing bonsai, you're not designing it to be popular. I'm not saying that you should look to see what people are looking at and then try and copy that style or that characteristic in your trees. I'm saying that what am I saying? I'm saying that you should design your trees for yourself, but you should have that element of wildness to them, where they look like trees from nature. They have things you see in nature. And again, it comes back to studying trees. The more you study wild trees, trees in nature, the more you'll get a feel for what makes a miniature tree look like a miniature tree, and what makes a tree interesting. And to me, a lot of people, it comes down, they say, oh, you got to have movement and curves to the trunk. And no, a straight trunk tree can be just as interesting as this twisty, bizarre looking tree. And sometimes more, because the emphasis maybe isn't on that curvy, twisty trunk, it's on the bark texture on the trunk, or the branch placement off of that trunk, or the taper of the trunk, or the fluting or the ridges on the trunk. You don't have to have a really twisty trunk to make the tree interesting. And that's my opinion anyway. I get sick of every tree having the twisty movement to the trunk. That's one style of a tree, and when you go to a bonsai show, sometimes 80 to 90% of the trees are all in this style, where they all have the twisted, contorted trunks, and it's not boring, but it gets boring because it's so common. And again, I'm drawn to the unusual. So back to working on the trees. So that's my kind of cool, bizarre branch tree here. Very interesting. I really, really like this tree. And I think when people see it at the show, they'll really like it too, because it's got cool branches. It's probably, well, on the main tree here, you can see in this section, I've got 1, 2, almost 3 branches coming from one spot. And again, it's very, very bizarre and unusual on a bonsai, but it really makes this tree special because it has unique features that, you know, the tree grew like that. You know, I didn't graft a branch on here having 3 branches. It's like the tree had a say in what it looks like, and I'm very happy with the result of that natural selection of branches. Sometimes the tree grows in a way that is really nice. That's why I like to let the tree have a say. You know, I prune it, then the tree grows. And sometimes the way the tree grows isn't according to what I expected, but sometimes it's really cool to have those natural features show through. On this branch, you'll notice that I've got kind of a straight, it's not straight, but a straighter branch out front, and then behind is this really cool twisty one. I could take this whole one off. It would definitely improve the tree. And it would clean up this area a bit. I'm getting, these upper branches are shading up this bottom branch way too much. So I'm thinking of taking this whole branch off. So here's that branch I'm talking about. Wow, it's a big cut, but yeah, definitely this branch behind is way more interesting. I mean, this one's okay. And I thought about, well, do I want to have a double branch? It's another cool feature. But I don't think so, not in this case. So I'm going to take the upper one off. So here I go. This is a big cut. Now this wood is pretty soft, so I can use the fine scissors, hopefully. So here I go, big cut coming up. Oh yeah, cut really easily. There's that branch come off. And now I'm left with that really cool branch below. Just doing a little cleanup here of my stubs. Making that branch a little more compact. And there's a stub to take off. I've got to clean that cut up a bit. So I'll come in very carefully and kind of prune it back. I can get in there, oh, right there. Okay, and take it just back a bit more here. So there, so you'll see that'll heal quite nicely. It'll look very natural. Yeah, that is one cool branch. Now, I could take this upper part off that's sticking up, and I think I will. Keeping the branch a little more flowing. Here's a look at the forest now. Making good progress. I think that second tree is looking quite nice. It's a very interesting tree. The trees are starting to get some good bark on them. That's just come recently within the last 3 or 4 years. And I think in the next 3 or 4 years, you'll see a lot of cracking of the bark on the trunks. They'll start to look more ancient. And it takes a long time on these native larches. It can take, well, these trees are, probably getting close to 30 years old. And it's just starting to get that texture on the bark, which is pretty awesome to see. Yeah, okay, I'll keep going. Keep going with the pruning. Yeah, that tree's pruned up. Very interesting tree. I really like this tree. Looks very larch-like too. And that's one thing I find. I've been looking at a lot of larch bonsai forests on the internet, and Many of them, my first impression when I see the forest is that they don't really look like larch trees so much. They're too manicured and smooth, and if you look at a larch tree in nature, sometimes they're very chaotic looking, and I think it's important to capture some of that in your bonsai. Now, the next tree here, I have a branch coming straight towards the viewer. And oh my goodness, it's like a real eye poker, but it doesn't bother me. It looks okay. Let me show you that. So right here, you can see this branch comes straight towards the front of the forest. It's and again, it doesn't bother me. For some reason, it doesn't bother me. It's not, maybe because this tree is set back in the forest, so it's not coming out front. It's not an eye poker branch, but it does come out towards the viewer. But it doesn't threaten you, maybe, is the reason I like it. The only solution to that branch would be to either kill it off, cut it off, and I don't really want to do that. That branch grew there, and I'm going to keep it. So I can, however, sort of redirect it so it's not coming straight out towards you. So I can prune, it back, making it more compact. Certainly never hurts. Pruning to downward facing buds. Prune this part off. Yeah, sort of like that. So it's still there, but it doesn't bother me. I think it's kind of, again, one of those features that you probably won't see a branch coming straight out towards the viewer in too many forests. So it's something that people can go, oh, I don't know about that branch, and then I guess it doesn't hurt, and I don't know, maybe makes you rethink your bonsai ideas a bit. Maybe you'll question yourself. It's always interesting seeing how these larches bud out. My tree in the back corner here, which is nice and green, you can see it's always the first one to bud out. And then the other trees, there's like random branches that are greening up. It's very strange. Eventually it all greens up evenly, but yeah, they do it in stages and steps and not all at the same time. Very interesting. All right, I'm going to keep pruning away. Pruning these branches on these larches kind of reminds me of the ficus, because at the moment you can see all the buds coming out and you can clearly see what's alive and what's dead and where to prune back to. But once this starts coming out, these start extending, it just becomes like a dense cloud of green, and you can't really see the branch structure as clearly. And just like a ficus, when the new branches and leaves are emerging, you can clearly see the structure, and the foliage is kind of in balance with the structure of the tree. You can kind of see both clearly. And the larches in spring are like that. When the buds are just coming out, you can see the structure of the branches and the trunks and the needles coming out, and it looks perfect. And then it starts growing in and it just becomes like a massive green. So when it gets like that, you have to do thinning. You have to start thinning the needles so you can expose more of the branch structure and the trunks, so it's not just like a green blob, your tree. So yeah, so I'm working away at this tree. I can clearly see where all the buds are coming out, thinning it, getting it ready for that, that time where it starts to all fill in to a solid green color. Around the back of the forest, this is the back side, I also have another unusual branch forming, and it's this one here. So it's a cathedral branch, a natural one that's shooting skyward. And I'll let that form. It'll be like my cathedral branch on this tree. A very natural occurrence in nature. You don't see them on all trees, but occasionally, you see them, and it'll look very natural coming up the back of this tree. So I'm just kind of pruning away, giving this room so there's light on my cathedral branch, and it'll grow up and become, yeah, a very kind of cool, unique branch in this forest. I'll show you what I've pruned off so far. So here is all the trimmings. So quite a bit, you know, some fairly, I guess, you know, fairly major branches, ramification, a lot of ends, tips of branches. So I'm going to leave the pruning at this for today because I'm going to come back to it tomorrow. It's very cool in the greenhouse here. My toes are frozen. And I don't want this to become a chore. I love working on each individual tree, and I don't want to get to the point today where I'm tired and not thinking properly, in that robotic mode where you're pruning back without thinking too much. And I think that's a dangerous area to get into, where it becomes a chore that you want to get finished rather than something you love doing. And spreading the work out definitely helps. So you come tomorrow morning with a fresh eye, fresh energy. You don't want to be out here for hours and hours and hours working away at your trees, unless you're a professional and it's your job. You don't want to be out here to the point where you're getting tired, every tree starting to look the same, and you're wishing you just were done. So I don't want to get to that point. So that's why I'm leaving the video as it is for today. So this will be part 1. I'm stepping back now, having a look at the pruning operation so far. I can see a couple of problems with the forest. Is that the trees back here are pretty well the same height as the main tree in the forest, this one here. So that's something I can keep my eyes on, is to try and get that. Well, the main tree will grow a little taller, and I'll have to keep these two pruned back a little shorter, especially the one over here. It's getting a little tall. It should be pruned back. So I'll see what I can do. I'll keep that in mind when I'm pruning the forest. There's the occasional, like, if I'm looking from the front of the forest, there's 2 trees here that are almost in line. I'll just rotate it a bit. Now this is something, it's a phenomena. When you view a forest from the distance, it's different than if you view it up close. When you view it up close, those trees aren't in line. It's because you're viewing it from far away that they don't perfectly line up, but they are close to each other from the front view, the front distance view. Now, if I move the camera in closer, here is a more of a close-up view. And you can see that, you can clearly see these 2 trunks now. So if you're up close to this forest, none of the trees line up. And you'll find that with every forest, is that unless they're spaced in a line, you will always get some trees that overlap, depending how close or far away you are in the trees and the angle you view. If I come over here, I can get trees to line up. If I come over this direction, I can get trees to line up. So the distance view, to me, isn't all that important if 2 trees are kind of coming close to overlapping, because it's only in that one view that the trees are like that. From the camera, they line up. It's not from where I'm standing. It's a little different perspective, but they almost line up from the front distance view. But again, it doesn't bother me at all, because it's only one specific view, and maybe that'll be the view that it's photographed in, and people will say, oh, those 2 trees are kind of in front of each other. But again, it doesn't bother me at all. Go into any forest and you'll see this too. You'll see 2 trees that are almost lined up. So again, it's going for a more natural look rather than a mathematical placement of each tree so they never cross in any view, which never happens. It's something you write in a textbook, and it doesn't hold true depending how near or far away you are from the forest, your perspective of the forest. So again, from a true front view with no perspective, yes, they almost line up, but in any other real world view, they don't. The difficult decisions never seem to end in bonsai. You're always looking at your trees, reevaluating the design, the branch structure, pruning for the future. It's a never-ending process. I really enjoy it. I had a lot of fun pruning out my trees today. I would say I'm about halfway done on the forest, pruning them up, and I think it's still looking good. I think that ramification I lost is offset by the increase in the overall structure of the tree, getting that conical shape and kind of sorting the branches out, the vigor, and pruning for the future. So that is it for part 1 of today, pruning up the larch forest for 2023. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.